right, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. Folks, I have always wanted to talk about things that were more fun. I've always wanted to talk about like bands like Tool and just totally jamming out the culling voices or talking about the light show at the Tool show. I mean, folks, I want to talk about anything, honestly, other than economics. But it seems like there's not enough alternative media out there that's willing to do it. And since the mainstream media is just going to pump you full of bullshit, I've got like this duty. I have no choice but to talk to you about it. And let me just tell you in advance, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I could go back to doing nothing but posting about Capitals hockey games or, Connor McDavid and that whole experience of watching some of the best goal scorers of all time. I wish I could have a carefree life that didn't involve talking about economics, for God's sakes. But that is the flavor of the day, and that is what I've got to talk to you about. And what I want to talk to you about in particular is taxes and the national debt. And I really want to talk to you at some length about the concept of the Federal Reserve. I don't want to get too far into it because let me just warn you all, if you're into conspiracies and you really want to hear a good tale about the Jews and all the stuff about the Rothschilds, this is probably not going to be the live stream for you. It's probably not going to be exciting for you because Blofeld won't be interested in the things I have to say because I'm just telling you the facts and all the other, anti-Semitic bullshit won't come up in this. So forgive me in advance. It's just going to be economics. So, we talk a lot here, obviously, about economics because it is the most important subject any of us could have on our plates. I mean, literally the most important subject because it is the thing that enables us to do every single program that we claim we want to do. It's the thing that's going to allow us to move to green energy and get away from fossil fuels. And it is the thing that's going to allow us to give each other free health care, get rid of student debt, and a Green New Deal as a whole with a job guarantee, expanded Social Security, paid family and medical leave, you name it. All of these things require a competent electorate and a competent Congress to understand the basics of macroeconomics. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try and dumb this down so that regular Jane and Joe Sixpack can grok this, can get this, can understand it. So the first thing you need to understand right off the bat is what the dollar even is. The dollar, this is a means of settling debts, right? And it's the United States unit of account. It's a legal entity, right? It's not a piece of paper. It's a unit of measure, like an inch, or a pound, or a millimeter. It's just a unit of measure. And so with that, it's basically used to keep score. It doesn't have any intrinsic value in and of itself. It simply represents a unit of measure, in this case, a buying measure, a unit of measure measured in terms of tax credits. In other words, the United States government agrees to accept $1 for $1 in tax liability. It's that simple. It's a one-to-one thing. If you go past this, you're going to miss the entire point of this. If I tell you that your $1 will absolve you of $1 of tax liability, 1-to-1, that in and of itself is a debt. So the U.S. dollar is nothing more than a tax credit. So what would the outstanding national debt be to a country that creates its own unit of measure, the inch, the pound, the millimeter, the dollar, whatever? What would be the debt? Well, the debt is the sum total of every untaxed dollar that's floating around in the economy, around the world. That's the debt. It's not owed to anyone. It will never be paid back. There's no reason to pay it back. It's paying it back to ourselves. So if you just look at the government side of the ledger, you have a double entry accounting. This is basic stuff. We learned it in high school. You took a basic accounting class, you learned about liabilities and assets. You learned about how on one side of the ledger has to be one thing and on the other side of the ledger has to be another thing. They always equal zero. If you don't have a balance of zero, then you've done something wrong, right? Right. All right. So when you think about what the U.S. government's debt is, it's all the untaxed dollars. They've issued dollars out, and it's all of them that haven't been paid back. That's the debt. I want you to hear what I just said. The national debt is nothing more than the sum total of every United States dollar that is in circulation today, be it electronic or paper, that has not been paid back in taxes. That's the national debt. Let that sink in for a minute. Think about it long and hard. And now let's go ahead and see what that means to us. If somebody says they want to reduce the national debt, what they're actually saying is they want to bring more of those dollars that are in circulation out of circulation and destroy them. Because what happens is when the Congress authorizes spending, the Federal Reserve creates deposits into the Treasury's accounts. The Treasury then spends those dollars into existence. Once those dollars are paid back in some form of tax, they're deleted. It's a circuit. This way you don't hear, any reason to ever hear anyone ever say, what are you going to do? Just print more money? When you hear someone say that, you instantly know that they don't know their ass from their elbow. You instantly know that they do not understand federal finance, and you instantly know that you've got a student there in front of you. The question is, can you teach them? Can they learn? Are they willing to learn? Do they want to be correct, or do they want to just go ahead running around saying ridiculously silly things that we've all been brainwashed into thinking at one point or another? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. What is the implications of realizing that tax dollars don't actually do anything other than get deleted? What is the purpose of a dollar then if you're just deleting it? Why is the government issuing dollars? Why is it spending them into existence? And then when they come back in taxes, why is it deleting them? Well, the government had to be able to provision itself. It had to be able to buy things that are out there in the private sector so that it could provision itself, whether it wanted to build roads, whether it wanted to build schools, whether it wanted to build giant monuments to the great fathers of our country, whatever, right? All the BS. At the end of the day, the government decides that it wants to do something. It wants to build a standing army. It wants to, build a bridge. It wants to create a superhighway. It wants to create train stations. It wants to, create airports and air traffic control systems and whatever else that is required. It needs labor. It needs minerals. It needs water. It needs all sorts of stuff. So how does it acquire those things? Well, it had to have something to get those into its possession to be able to create. And so it has this unit of account, the dollar. Bing, bing, a little piece of paper or a digit in a calculator somewhere or whatever. It is a unit of measure that the government freely creates every time it authorizes spending. But why would we take that dollar? Who cares about that piece of paper? It's worthless, right? It's all in our faith in the dollar. If we lose faith in the dollar, then we won't use it anymore, right? Well, not so much. When the United States government issues a tax and you don't pay it, there are consequences, right? Sometimes they're really bad consequences, but they're consequences nonetheless. So what is it that the United States dollar does for all of us? It allows our government to provision itself. It creates buyers and sellers of goods. And because the dollar is used to clear debts and make payments, and it is the government's unit of account, that dollar is God, if you will, of the U.S. The U.S. government is able to create what it wants with it. But because it's not worth anything on its own, the government had to create a way of making it have value or serve the purpose that we wanted to of clearing liabilities and paying debts. So it issues a tax payable only in the U.S. dollar. You can't pay your tax with anything other than the United States dollar. That's it. You can't pay it in diamonds. You can't pay it in petrodollars. You can't pay it in gold. You can't pay it in cotton. You can't pay it in Bitcoin. You can't pay it in Chinese yuan, and you can't pay it in Japanese yen. You can't pay it in Gaddafi's gold, and you can't pay it in Iranian gold, and you can't pay it in Russian gold. You can't pay it in gold, period. You can only pay your taxes in United States dollars. And if you remember, I already told you, U.S. dollars are deleted when they're received as a tax by the federal government. Let that sink in for a second. I want you to think about what the implications are by saying what I just said. There's probably someone out there tempted to say that I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's okay. I'm probably not talking to you. You're probably not my audience. But if you have ears to hear and you want to learn, stick around. Hopefully it'll all come together. And you can fact check me. It's the best part of this. I'm just merely reporting the way it is. This isn't something I've created. This is the way it is. It's the way it is with all fiat currencies around the world and throughout the history of time. You look at Canada. You look at Japan. You look at the UK. You look at Australia. And many other countries. And they all have their own currency that they are in control over, that they use to provision themselves. It's a state currency. So that way, there is no issue with, well, if I lose faith in the dollar, I can always use Bitcoin. Well, no, you still buy $200 worth of Bitcoin. And when you exchange your Bitcoin, you still get $200. Bitcoin is nothing more than just an envelope. It's just merely a way of tucking dollars in anonymously and sending them through a system end to end. You may as well have Beanie Babies. It's the same thing. It's a speculator's dream, but it has nothing to do with a currency. Do you understand that? Does that make sense? Anyone can create currency. Anyone can. The question is, can you get it accepted? And the only way that you can really get it accepted is to levy an obligation in it, payable only in it. You see how that works? So that's why all these fiat currencies can't fail. The tax is what drives them. Now, invariably, you have someone come out and say, well, what about Venezuela? Worked out real great for Venezuela. And they laugh, ha, 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 like they've got some, like they know it, right? Or they'll go, oh, what are you going to do? Turn us into Weimar-Germany or something? Or what about Zimbabwe? Folks, all of these whataboutisms have nothing to do with fiat currency. They have absolutely nothing to do with printing money. Every single one of these gotchas, these hyperinflation scenarios, always start from a position of either foreign debt, payable only in a foreign currency that they can't control, political corruption that has rendered the entire economy and the entire country unstable, or the productive capacity of that country has been decimated, like in Weimar-Germany. But let's look at Venezuela for just a second. Venezuela has a single export. One, their economy is based on crude that they can't exactly refine. Not well, anyway. And they have the ability to sell that crude all over the place. The problem is that there are other nations that produce crude too. And they produce the refined petroleum products. And so they were able to screw Venezuela from being able to pay its foreign debt by screwing with the commodity that they based their entire economy on. And then make it a little bit worse, Venezuela also had their currency pegged, meaning tied to US dollars. In other words, you had to be able to convert your currency to US dollars. That means they had to have so many US dollars on hand to do that. And then they had debts like Weimar, payable only in a foreign currency. So they lost their ability to really handle their economy. Has nothing to do with printing money. Did you hear that? Did you get that? Will you repeat that, or will you go running around talking about printing money and hyperinflation? Let's talk about Weimar-Germany for a minute. Weimar-Germany. The Germans had just been crushed in World War I. The Treaty of Versailles had destroyed Germany. Destroyed them. The punishment was so severe. The people were destitute. France, being the way the French have always been, went ahead and said, you're only able to pay us our debt back in French francs, a foreign currency that they had no control over, which meant that they had to sell their exports to get French francs. Well, the industry leaders and the folks that worked in the industrial region went on strike basically and said, we're not going to do this work. We're not going to do this for these people. And the productive capacity of Weimar dropped just blew up, just went completely stopped. And so between the war, sanctions, and all the reparations they had to pay, payable in foreign debt, Reichsmark, they tried to print their way out of the hole. They couldn't because the money had no value. And that gave rise to Hitler. And the rest is history, as they say. But it had nothing to do, once again, with printing money. Why do you suppose people say that it had to do with printing money? Do you think that people will keep saying printing money? Or do you think they'll get it right this time? Now that they've been disabused, now that the truth is so easy to understand, do you think they'll still talk about printing money? Do they have any integrity? If they have integrity, they'll never say printing money again. But if they lack integrity, if their character is weak, they'll continue to talk about printing money as a hyperinflation issue. So just keep that in mind when you're judging the character of an individual once they've heard the truth. If they continue to say it, you know you're dealing with somebody that's not really terribly interested in benefiting society with truth. They're just about conspiracy bullshit. And what about Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe's a pretty big one, right? Well, Mugabe, in an effort to try to renationalize their farms and give back to the warriors who had fought in all the wars, he gave all the farmland that had been run by colonizers. He gave that to the indigenous folks of of Zimbabwe. Well, they were not skilled farmers, and the productive capacity of the entire nation dropped and plummeted. It didn't matter how much money they printed out. There was no food. And so the shortages and the lack of production and the corruption created another hyperinflation scenario. Again, the real resources weren't there against the need of the people. And so it didn't matter if you only had 10 loaves of bread and a million people wanting 10 loaves of bread. It didn't matter how much money you printed. At the end of the day, there wasn't enough to go around. A resource constraint, not printing money. So I ask you again, now that you see 3 separate hyperinflation scenarios, not one of which was based in printing money, why do you think people will continue to say that it's about printing money? Seriously, I want you to think about this. These are the lies that kill us, that keep us completely useless. They keep us from fighting for a Green New Deal. They keep us from understanding that we can have health care for all. Forget Medicare for all. We can have a whole-blown national health service. Instead of the government charging for student loans, why not give free education to the people and invest in the people? Why are we treating students like a debt obligation instead of treating them as an investment? Why is it we keep putting the burden on the backs of the little people when the federal government can easily handle every one of these scenarios? Why do we have bridges in America that are rated D, that it's take your life into your own hands every time you cross them? Why do we have schools that are falling apart and dilapidated? Why are kids going to school and unable to go to gym class every day of the week? Instead, it's like once every 3 weeks. Or why is it that they don't have home ec and driver's ed anymore? Because the places are saying they're broke. It's because of the lie that I've just laid out. Everybody believes the United States is broke. Well, it creates the dollar out of thin air, for God's sakes. How do you think the war machine keeps going? How do you think we were able to give $800 billion to the war machine while simultaneously slashing taxes? How do you think that happened? You know, there's a saying by Warren Mosler that government checks don't bounce. And it's true, they don't. And United States debt is the safest debt in the world. Why is that? Well, we create our own money, sovereign debt. China, do you think we owe Chinese yen, or excuse me, yuan, to the Chinese? Do you think we're borrowing yuan? No. China purchases treasury bonds with the money they receive in doing trade with the United States. Because when people buy Chinese goods and services, they're buying them in US dollars. And the Chinese have a choice. What do I do with these US dollars? Do I buy treasuries and earn a small interest? Or do I just hold on to them? Or do I take them to some foreign exchange and trade them out for another currency that I want to save in to facilitate trade with that country? And lo and behold, when China has enough dollars to do what it wants to do in terms of its trade with the United States, it may sell off some of its treasury bonds. It may end up redeeming them. It may end up reselling them to someone else. Whatever. Bottom line is, at the end of the day, we don't owe China anything. The interest that they get paid on the debt, where does that money come from? It's already budgeted. When we decide that we're going to sell treasury bonds and China says, yeah, we'll buy those bonds, we've already budgeted that interest. And that interest is not paid for by tax dollars or anything else like that. It's all keystroke entries. It's literally just marking accounts up and marking them down. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So why do you think people think we go to China and go, dear Chinese people, will you please bail us out? Can we please borrow some US dollars from you, China? Think about how ludicrous that is. Think about how stupid it is. When do we ever take out a credit card from the People's Republic of China? When do we ever do that? We don't. So why did Obama say that we do? Why do so many say that? You got to ask yourself that question, because the answer to that question is going to free your mind. And it's going to open the door to a Green New Deal. And it's going to open your door to free college. It's going to open your mind to a host of things you never thought possible. So I ask you this question. We've already addressed the debt. We know what dollars are. They're a tax credit. We've already addressed the bullshit about hyperinflation. Anyone that says that, is not someone credible to listen to. They don't understand economics, and they should not be talking about it. They should only be asking questions. They should never be speaking with any authority. And the Federal Reserve. Congress spoke them into existence in 1913. Their charter has been rewritten and changed and altered many, many times since it began. The Federal Reserve serves as a way of clearing payments. That's it. It's a scorekeeper in the middle of the game. United States dollars. What are dollars again? Remember? They're units of measure, right? They're just inches, they're pounds. At the end of the day, they're a tax credit. But Article 1, Section 8 of our U.S. Constitution clearly states that Congress alone has the power of the purse. So how does money come into being? Well, it comes into being a couple ways. The top one is when Congress spends on the people. Well, Congress hasn't really exactly been doing that lately, have they? In fact, you can look over the course of time, and over the last 40 plus years, you could clearly state that the government has stopped taking care of its people almost exclusively. And over that period of time, we've had another form of money coming into the economy. That other form is bank loans. The other way that they can come in. Of course, you can always sell goods and services outside the United States and have imports or export money come in. But that really is irrelevant, because why do we want to take our goods and services, the real resources, and trade them away for other people's pieces of paper? Imports are a real value. Exports are a real cost. Think about that for a minute. We're getting their real goods and services for our pieces of paper, or vice versa. That's a big deal, right? That's a big deal to understand. So the Federal Reserve serves as a clearinghouse. It tries to adjust bank lending rates through the overnight window, through open market operations. It sells bonds. It quantitatively eases when it wants to give more liquidity to the economy, to help clear payments, because remember, that's what it does. And sometimes it quantitatively tightens when it's trying to make the payment system have more loaning power, because if you have too many within the banking system, you can stop lending altogether because there's no value to them. This brings up the repo market and stuff, which I've just recently been learning about myself. And you'll be able to hear about when Nathan Tankus comes onto our next podcast this Saturday at 8 a.m. But I want you to think about this for a minute. We have been hamstrung by the idea of the national debt, and we've been hamstrung by the idea of taxes and not needing more taxes from the rich to pay for these programs. My God, how do we pay for them? We need the tax dollars. I want to explain something to you about this. Taxes drive currency. It drives the need for us to have currency. The obligation is what causes us to go to work. The obligation is what causes us to have to pay our taxes and have to have that dollar. However, those dollars being deleted, so they don't pay for the programs we're looking for, right? So taxes don't finance or pay for those programs. You've heard me say taxes don't fund spending. Well, they don't. But what taxes do is provide the impetus for creating buyers and sellers of goods and services. Some might play a game saying that means fund, but that would be stupid to say, because that's not really what it is. It's really more of a catalyst. It's really more of a driver. It's really more of the cause and effect. The tax is what creates unemployment. And getting employed is what creates the ability to pay one's tax. This is the circle. You want to complicate it? Knock yourself out. You want to keep it simple, stupid, so that you know how to be effective as a progressive? Take what I'm saying to heart. The United States government can afford anything that's available for purchase in U.S. dollars. Period. Period. So this is of incredible importance. Why do you suppose someone like Nancy Pelosi would advocate for something called pay-go, forcing tax dollars, forcing us to raise taxes to pay for programs when we've clearly shown, and if you haven't paid attention, go back and listen. We have clearly shown that taxes do not pay for these programs. So what is the limit for spending? Where is the danger zone at? Well, the limit for spending is inflation. That's what it should be, not some arbitrary budget number. And we haven't seen inflation in forever. To put an exclamation point on it, Japan, who has a lot of natural resources, no standing army, by the way, no petrodollar, none of that, just a free-floating sovereign fiat currency. They have a debt to GDP, right? You know that whole gross domestic product thing everybody cares so much about for whatever reason. They have almost a 300% debt to GDP ratio there, way more than the United States. They can't even get 2% inflation there. Same with the U.S. The only difference is that we spend ridiculous amounts of money on the war machine. But the minute you talk about taking care of the people, some bonehead will talk about Weimar-Germany the minute we talk about taking care of people. What kind of person does that? I mean, seriously, what kind of person does that? You gotta not. I don't even want to go into detail about what I feel about that. But suffice it to say, it's that thinking that leaves a lot of homeless people homeless and a lot of people that are vulnerable dead, keeps us engaged in wars, and keeps us from ever solving the climate crisis. Now, one of the other big things is the federal job guarantee. The federal job guarantee is a tricky thing. A lot of people don't really understand it, but they got a lot of opinions about something they don't understand. Not a particularly smooth place to be. If you don't understand it, yet you have a deeply held position about something you don't understand, you may want to check yourself at the door and think about this for a minute. The federal job guarantee that Bernie Sanders is advocating in his Green New Deal and has been pushed forward by modern monetary theorists for some time, and long since championed by folks like Martin Luther King Jr. The federal job guarantee is a superior counter-cyclical, meaning opposite of, in cycles. It's a stabilizer for the economy. When the economy starts going bad, people would roll onto the job guarantee. That would keep the economy going during business downturns. And when business picks up, people would roll off the job guarantee. But what is a job guarantee, and what are these jobs? And is this just make work? No. This is what I like so much about many of the people that are working on the job guarantee. The job guarantee is about redefining work. It's about ensuring that things that previously weren't compensated can be compensated. It's a means of providing a wage floor or a buffer stock of employed people. To give a living wage to people based on jobs that were created at the local level, decided in your local communities at your local town hall meeting, and then funded by the federal government. Not taxpayer dollars, by the way, because there is no such thing as taxpayer dollars. Sorry, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And for all you Democrats out there who so proudly regurgitated Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher's conservative right-wing thinking, neoliberal thinking, look no further than the mirror when you want to know why nothing's changed. You have parroted your enemy. You have decided to take the most racist, screwed up statement, the taxpayer dollar, and you've put it forward all in the name of social justice, when in fact you're invoking this racist trope that focuses on, once again, the white man that pays the taxes. The job guarantee is a federally funded, locally administered, counter-cyclical stabilizer that redefines work. So whether it be an artist, whether it be taking care of a sick loved one, whether it be working with kids in your local community doing whatever, or whether it just be simply some other work that your community had previously not funded but finds value, and you all vote on it. It's a democracy enhancer. So you look at this, we started off with what the dollar was. It's a tax credit. Then we talked about taxes, and we realized that taxes don't pay for programs. Then we realized that hyperinflation isn't about printing money. And then we realized that the death of the dollar is a tax. So in other words, when we tax money out of existence, we're not just printing money. We know we don't print money. That's not how it works. And we know the national debt is nothing more than the sum total of every untaxed dollar in existence since the dawn of time. So who gives a shit about blowing up the deficit? Who gives a shit about national debt? It's all a farce. A farce that Obama led you down, that Bush led you down, that Trump has led you down, that Hillary Clinton has led you down. And it's time to learn better, do better, say better, be better. Be a better human being and learn. And so finally, as we're sitting here, I don't know why it is, but people glom on to these James Bond stories about the national debt and the Federal Reserve and the Rothschilds and all the other nonsense that goes along with these Alex Jones myths and legends. The private Federal Reserve, the only thing federal about it's its name. It's like the Federal Express, man. Cool dudes, man. Hey, man. How do these things grow lives like this? How do they take on a life of their own like this? How does the bullshit become more prevalent than the truth? I want you to think about this, because this right here, my friends, is why we have forest fires in California and we have no means of taking care of it. This is why the levees in New Orleans busted. This is why freaking Puerto Rico is being fire sailed to friggin' Bain Capital type vultures. This is why Detroit, Michigan still doesn't have water. Flint, Michigan doesn't have water. I mean, I could go on and on, but it wouldn't matter. Because for whatever reason, many people are more addicted to saying bullshit about the Federal Reserve, waxing poetic about the latest anti-Jew conspiracy bullshit, than actually solving any real problems. It's shameful. And it's going to be our undoing. It's going to be the thing when you look at your children later on and you can't answer why the world's blowing up around them. I'm sure you can blame someone else. But if you're out there fanning the flames about the national debt and reducing the deficit and all this other bullshit, you got to look at your kids and tell them honestly, you had a hand to play in handing over a shit sandwich to them. You lied to them, whether you knew it or not. We can say it more gently. You misspoke. You didn't know any better, but you had opinions, right? That sort of thing. But now it's time to do better, because we have this very, very small window of time to make bold action to stave off the worst effects of cataclysmic climate change. We've got less than 11 years to not just fund programs, but to actually implement them. I want you to think about that. You know that saying, it's in your hands, it's in our hands? Well, the truth is there for you. What are you going to do with it? It can't be me. It's not me, us. So we, collectively, have to take this knowledge everywhere and change the world. Or there won't be one there for us. Or actually, there'll be a world. We just won't be a part of it. It's time to do better. It's time to be better. It's time to be smarter. It's time to take knowledge and stop being edgy and cool. And yeah, the only federal about the Federal Reserve is the name. I mean, if I could roll my eyes back into my head, how much I want to roll them back every time I hear someone say that. It's like, okay, I know I can't count on you for anything useful. Moving on. I got to talk to people that really want to save people. I can't waste my time with that bullshit. But we need to take drastic action now. And the only way we can do that is to marshal the real resources which require the federal government to spend, and to spend crazy. Remember I asked you what the real limits were? Well, the real limits are inflation, but you start getting to that point when you hit full employment. Because if you've got unemployment, especially involuntary unemployment, the deficit is too damn small. It's too damn small. And so if you want to see these programs happen, you must demand your media, your alternative media, your politicians acknowledge this, and don't back down. Be recalcitrant. Be an activist. Push back. Do not allow them to gaslight or lie to you. We can do nice things. We can take care of our most vulnerable, and we can make life great for all. There's no reason life has to be this damn hard. Medication, freaking surgeries, bankruptcies. There's no reason for it other than our ignorance and allowing neoliberals to be passed forward as progressives because we don't know any better. or to celebrate the left that's just as ignorant as the right when it comes to ignoramus ideas about the economy. It's important that we stop being, I'm a lefty, I'm a righty, or whatever, and just straight up look at economics and say, how does a dollar come to be? And if this is the case, then what is our real priorities here? What is the things that have to be taken care of? Because we can do it. Folks, my name's Steve Grumbine. I am the founder and CEO of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action. Real Progressives is a 501c3 and Real Progress in Action is a 501c4. I'm also the host of Macro and Cheese, a podcast that's released every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. at www.macro.cheese.com. Each one of our podcasts have experts in the field that explain not only economics, but the scenarios by which we are all dealing with today. I'm asking you, if you agree or like what we're doing here, please consider becoming a monthly donor. It's very expensive to run these things, and it's extremely time-consuming. We need help. We need volunteers. We need financial contributions. And as a 501c3 pending, folks that donate to our nonprofit will be able to take a tax write-off for that. But that shouldn't be your impetus. I'm hoping your impetus is you want to get this word out there. You want to make sure that people know that we can do nice things. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a great day, everybody. I'm out.